My name is Emily. I married my husband John 3 years ago, and now we live a dual-income life together. I work in an office job, while my husband John is a system engineer. Since I usually get home earlier, I take care of things like dinner and bath. However, I'm not a morning person, so he makes breakfast for us. And even prepares our lunch boxes before making breakfast. So, we've been in a mutually supportive relationship for these past 3 years. But suddenly, unusual contacts started coming to both of us. First, John received a call from his mother. His mother and I don't have a bad relationship, but we don't have much to talk about either. That's because she doesn't seem to be very interested in John. It seems John was an easygoing child who could manage everything on his own without much help. In contrast, his younger sister Rose seemed to be a much more demanding child. And his mother seemed to favor her over John. This doesn't seem to have changed even as they've grown up. Unlike John, who can take care of himself, Rose seems to rely heavily on her parents even as an adult. And his mother continues to dote on her. So, when John and I got married, his mother just offered some formal words of congratulations, and that was it. I had heard from John that his parents prioritized Rose over him. And I thought, based on those formal greetings, that they weren't very interested in us. Because of this, we never felt the need to contact his parents. And they rarely contacted us either. So, both John and I were surprised by the sudden contact. He answered the phone and exchanged a few words before hanging up. What was that about? Rose is getting married. Huh? I was surprised. To John and me, Rose seemed like a grown-up girl who still depended on her parents for everything. And spent her time at home without working, receiving allowances from her parents while trying to find a boyfriend to go out with. We saw her as someone who underestimated the real world. Both John and I didn't have a very favorable impression of her. When we went to visit John's family, she pushed me aside, saying, "I have a date with my boyfriend," and left. That was the only image we had of her. So we didn't expect our impression of her to get any worse. But she exceeded our imagination. Not only did she make unreasonable demands, but she also ordered food without hesitation when Rose said, "I'm not in the mood for fish today," while poking at the grilled fish with her fork tines. I couldn't help but tense up. When I visited John's family with him, my parents immediately liked John, but they expressed their dislike for his family quite openly. However, they restrained themselves from saying anything inappropriate at the celebratory meeting of both families. In the end, it turned into a gathering aimed at pleasing Rose, rather than a meeting of both families, and John apologized for that. However, my parents, who had been informed in advance by John that his family might be unusual, shook their heads in response to John's apology. Both of them insisted that John wasn't at fault, but they were worried about his family. If that family were to attend the wedding, it could potentially disrupt the atmosphere. This time, it was a gathering of close family members. So it might be forgiven, but since the wedding would also include colleagues from work, it might be better not to invite them. In fact, my father was the president of a company, which made John genuinely concerned about his family. My father is the president of the company I work for. But I didn't mention it to John until he proposed. At that moment, he made a hesitant expression and said, "So, Emily being the president's daughter, if my family turns out to be strange people, will they oppose our marriage?" Back then, I didn't understand what he meant. But after meeting his family, I became sure of it. I didn't want to introduce them to my father, his acquaintances, or people from the company. Maybe John had been thinking the same way as me because he said, "I won't invite my family to the wedding. Instead, my grandparents, who have been like parents to me, can attend. Is that okay?" I didn't doubt John, but my parents and I decided to meet John's grandparents. We met them at the same traditional French restaurant as before. And they turned out to be genuinely nice people. They were the ones who raised John and made him who he is today. So, my parents felt reassured, and we decided to invite John's grandparents to the wedding. To avoid any unexpected disruptions, we decided not to inform his parents and his sister Rose about the wedding, and proceeded with the ceremony. A few days after the wedding, John's family was informed about the wedding and the decision not to invite them. But they just said, "Oh, that's just fine. When you had your wedding, we happened to be on a trip with Rose. We had no choice but to miss it. I couldn't help but feel sad even though it wasn't about me." I told John that I didn't want him to feel lonely, and he quietly hugged me. With that history, neither of us had a good impression of Rose or his parents. However, if we were invited to a wedding, both John and I would attend. After the contact from John's mother, his father also informed us that Rose was getting married. Then, Rose herself contacted us. According to John, her message was a boastful one. "I'm getting married to a wealthy man. I'll be living a life that's beyond comparison with yours. Aren't you jealous?" We were content with our modest life, so we didn't feel envious. However, we were indeed impressed by her marrying someone referred to as a wealthy man. When the wedding invitation arrived at our home, I was surprised to see the name of the groom. It turned out that he was someone I knew from my father's business connections. It's a small world, and I thought that sometimes strange coincidences happen. Both John and I attended the wedding. Rose and her husband looked very happy at the wedding, and the ceremony was magnificent and wonderful. I briefly wondered how much it must have cost, but seeing the couple so happy, I didn't dwell on it. Rose's parents were in tears, celebrating their beloved daughter's wedding. Right next to me, John mumbled, "Now, they can let go of their child," and it made me want to laugh. A few months after the wedding, I received some sad news. My uncle, who had always been fond of me, had passed away. I attended my uncle's funeral with my parents and John. I also extended my condolences to my uncle's wife and children, and offered to help them if they needed anything. About a month later, I received unexpected news about inheriting part of my uncle's estate. I was surprised by the inheritance news. However, within a few days, I received a call from Rose, out of the blue. I didn't know how she had my contact information, but I answered the call from an unknown number, and she said, "Hello, is this Emily's number? You're John's wife Emily, right?" Yeah. "It's me, but why are you contacting me?" "I've heard it from Mom, the contact info, I mean. I still think it would be better if you contacted John if you have something to say. Considering I've never even shared my contact info with you. I got it from Mom, okay? Anyway, what's this about inheritance?" I was surprised and asked. "Huh?" The inheritance discussion was something I had only shared with John. I couldn't imagine John sharing that with his parents or Rose. However, I didn't understand how Rose had come to know about it. I was puzzled, and Rose continued her explanation. "Inheriting the estate, is it $2 million? That's amazing. When are you getting the $2 million? From now on, Emily, you and your brother don't have to work like crazy. So life will be easier, right? I'd like a piece of that too." Rose, can you please calm down? I can't calm down. It's $2 million. I can't just sit here. I need to act fast. It seemed like Rose wasn't hearing my words as she abruptly ended the call. I thought about calling her back several times, but she remained unreachable. When I returned, I told John about Rose's call regarding the inheritance. He seemed surprised too and said, "I haven't discussed the inheritance with my parents or my sister. If John hadn't told her, where could Rose have heard about the inheritance? But Rose making a fuss about the inheritance isn't her concern, is it? It's unrelated to her. That's true, but she seemed so excited. She probably thinks that once we have the money, there might be some benefits for her too. Let's make sure to keep our distance from my family. I'll also warn Rose not to have any misconceptions. All right, please do. I had thought that John would put an end to this conversation with Rose. However, she had misunderstood something and caused quite a commotion. We only realized the extent of Rose's actions when her mother told us. Rose has built a $690,000 house. Rose was not working and was primarily a housewife, or at least that's what it looked like. Even with her husband being a wealthy heir. We found it hard to believe she would make such a massive purchase. Suddenly, John had a thought. Didn't she mention wanting a share of the inheritance over the phone? Well, yes, but what if she's thinking she'll get a share of the money too? Just by virtue of us inheriting it? I couldn't believe that she would think that way, even though it had crossed my mind earlier. However, if she had indeed built her house expecting a portion of the inheritance, she might have made an irreversible mistake. But the house was already built, and there was no turning back. As we contemplated what to do, I received a call from Rose. She sounded very cheerful. "Oh, Emily? It's me, Rose. By the way, where's my share? I've built a $690,000 house, you know. I really want my share soon. The payments are getting tight." Huh? Even though I had suspected it to some extent, I hadn't truly believed that she expected to receive a portion of the inheritance. I let out an incredulous gasp. Rose seemed annoyed and continued. "Could it be that you're trying to keep all $2 million to yourselves? Listen, when Emily inherits the $2 million, Emily and John will each get $690,000, right? Then, the remaining $690,000 will be mine. You better give me my share. I won't tolerate any greediness. I've already waived my inheritance." The insistence of Rose made me almost burst into laughter. Even if I were to inherit the estate, it would belong to me and not some portion to give away to her or John. While we might use it as a couple and discuss with John, there was not a penny earmarked for Rose. However, this was not the primary issue at hand. "What do you mean? It's a $2 million inheritance, right? Abandoning the inheritance is ridiculous, isn't it? I don't know what you're misunderstanding. But the $2 million from the inheritance includes his house on the island. But the island wasn't my uncle's property. So there's also money allocated for demolition, making it $2 million. When you consider the costs of demolition and my uncle's debts, only a few will be left. There were also complications related to visiting the island and other issues. So I decided to abandon the inheritance." Is this a lie? There's not even $690,000. I built a house, you know. I want my $690,000. We don't have that kind of money. In fact, I had realized when the inheritance reached me that there must have been a significant reason for my uncle's wife and children to abandon their shares. Listening to the details of the inheritance, I also decided to waive my claim. And I had discussed it with John. This can't be happening. I heard from my husband that his acquaintance passed away and left a $2 million fortune. I even made plans for the house against my husband's opposition, thinking I'd get money from you. It seemed that Rose had misunderstood and believed that I would give her $690,000 for the house she had built. She somehow shifted the blame onto me, saying, "How could you do this? You've ruined everything." Even though I had no recollection of such discussions or promises, I didn't tell her the inheritance details. It was simply her misconception. Regarding the house, can you please discuss it with your husband? Saying that, I hung up her call. When I told John about her conversation, he said, "My sister has really messed up. I can't believe she's this foolish." He immediately contacted Rose's husband, who explained, "I suspected something was off. But Rose came to my place with her parents and threatened to divorce me if I didn't agree to let her build the house." He continued, "In reality, the house hasn't been built yet." Hearing that the house had not yet been constructed, both John and I felt relieved. While we thought about it, my phone started ringing with calls from Rose. It seemed she was making the calls from her own house, and her husband explained, "She's trying to make calls with the door open. She's ranting about you, Emily. I'll start divorce proceedings." After apologizing to me, he added, "You're not at fault." I agreed with him and hung up. We decided to take a moment to calm down. When we checked the phone later, there were dozens of voicemails. Not just from Rose, but also from her parents. All of them seemed to be supporting Rose and berating me with comments like, "Rose is pitiful, don't deceive her. Get the money ready. You probably don't like Rose, do you? Stop being jealous of a young woman." Beside me, John muttered, "We need to cut ties with them." I had no desire to continue any relationship with them either. I also informed my parents about the situation to ensure Rose's parents didn't cause them any trouble. My father assured me, saying, "Don't worry, we'll handle it if they come over." Afterward, we remained mostly uninvolved in the matter. Rose apparently received a stern talk from her husband, who told her that he never trusted her and that she could go through with the divorce if she wanted. In the end, she caused such a scene that her husband had to call the police. It appears that Rose's husband tried to involve a third party in the conversation initially. He called a mutual friend to mediate. However, during Rose's outburst, she accidentally injured this friend, leading to a physical altercation that resulted in her being taken into custody by the police. While Rose was causing a scene and being taken away by the police, her parents decided to visit my family home. Upon arriving, they began shouting insults at me, saying, "Your daughter is a jinx. She promised to pay $690,000 but didn't." They also made derogatory remarks about me, prompting my parents to quickly report them as suspicious individuals and call the police. My father warned them, saying, "If you continue to insult my daughter, we'll get a lawyer involved." This seemed to have a sobering effect on Rose's parents, who became more composed. They received a call from Rose's husband, informing them that Rose had been taken by the police and was now free from her unreasonable demands. They learned that Rose hadn't actually built any house, and that her husband had grown tired of her demands, as well as her parents' encouragement. The fact that Rose had caused harm to a friend and was now being asked for money seemed to shock her parents. In the end, Rose went through with the divorce, surrendered all her money to her parents, and their family finances were in disarray. As for John and me, we never disclosed our new address, blocked them, and got new phones, so we believe we won't have any further involvement with them.